Yes, Purple Daily. It's time for another episode of Kirk or Blank, which we will dive into in just a moment after we thank Federated Insurance. Federated's been helping Minnesota business owners for over 100 years, based in Owatonna. And this is probably the craziest 4-month stretch in at least my lifetime. So if you're a business owner and you just need that frontline protection and you need some peace of mind and guidance, Federated Insurance is here to help. Federatedinsurance.com is where you can go to find trusted resources during the pandemic. Things might change even more if you're a business owner over the next coming months and the rest of the year. So just don't get caught off guard and make sure you have that protection. Federated Mutual Insurance Company. It's our business to protect yours.
You like that? You like that?
I'm Phil Mackey. We got Judd Zulgad, Courtney Cronin from ESPN.com. She covers the Minnesota Vikings, and we appreciate all of you either subscribing to our Purple Daily podcast feed or hitting us up with a subscription on the YouTube page, youtube.com/ScoreNorth. And ordinarily we do Kirk or Blank, and we give you a slate of 3 quarterbacks to choose from. Last week, Ryan Tannehill, Phillip Rivers, and Justin Herbert. This week, we're just going to do one. I think I know what the answer is. Maybe somebody will surprise, but Pat Mahomes just signed up to a $503 million 10-year contract if he goes through and plays the whole thing. He gets all the incentives. So the game is Kirk or Blank, and we're looking at contracts as well. And ordinarily, it's a 3-year window. But for this one, I'm going to give you Kirk and his contract or Pat Mahomes and his entire contract. Who do you choose? Let's start with Courtney.
Well, I choose Patrick Mahomes.
Okay,
I'm not
there it
going
is.
to filibuster here. I'm not going
Come
to try
on,
to
hot take it, Cronin.
There's no hot take to make. And I think the only, controversy you can try to stir up here would be over the structure of the contract and calling it a team-friendly deal, just given the way that the guarantees are structured and the fact that he gave the Chiefs control of him over the next 12 seasons. Because you'll remember, he was only coming off a year 3. They had his 5th-year option picked up, and they now have him under contract. It's a 10-year extension, but he had 2 years initially that were remaining on that rookie deal. So really good work here by the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that when you look at the length of this deal, 10 years usually in the NFL, we look at that and say, okay, well, what about the fluff money? What about the stuff at the end that's probably going to be more on the team side and that they can void it and it's not going to actually come to fruition? Well, the way that this contract is structured, Patrick Mahomes realistically has a chance to restructure given what the quarterback market could be in 5 years from now when Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, those guys are signing their next deals in 2025, let's say. So for a team that's chasing the New England Patriots, that is absolutely what they're doing. Patrick Mahomes said in the video that he posted on Twitter confirming the extension last night that we're chasing a dynasty. The bar is set at 6, so they've got 1 under their belt right now. I think this is a team that is in a 3 to 5 year Super Bowl window immediately, just when you think about the pieces he has around him on offense. Tyreek Hill, McCole Hardman, Travis Kelce, they're under contract for a couple more years. But think about all the free agents that are now going to want to come to Kansas City and play with Patrick Mahomes. And the money that they're going to have, given the way that they structured this deal, he's 15.4% of the cap or something like that this season. They've got money to spend going on beyond this 2020 year, and I think that they're going to be able to reload each time they want to and compete for another Lombardi.
This is not tough, right? I mean, the Chiefs have their QB. The Vikings, they're still looking. They like Kirk.
You like that?
They like Kirk, and Kirk's
are
good.
they dating Kirk Cousins? Because the Chiefs just married Pat Mahomes.
Oh, very, very much.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Vikings have been looking for that type of impact QB basically since Tarkington. You get him. The Chiefs did the right thing. 12 years is a long time, but you keep him. Yeah, this is from every angle an easy call because I'm trying to think of what would the hot take be, the counter to, yeah, but Mahomes and Cousins is signed short-term or to a shorter-term deal. And at every turn, I basically hit a roadblock of some sort saying, no, the Chiefs are the fortunate ones. The Chiefs are the team that did the right thing. There are a lot of teams, including teams in this division, the Vikings, the Bears, Detroit, perhaps, that would love to have the issue of, you know what, let's sign you for essentially 12 years. It is Pat Mahomes, and maybe about my 7th answer is, and maybe Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, it's Pat Mahomes, so there's no controversy on this episode. But I think it's worth sort of flushing out the second part of this. But the one thing that we've been begging Kirk Cousins to do, and some of this is just not part of his DNA as a quarterback, is, hey, when everything's falling apart around you, when the offensive line's having a bad game, or when the opposing team in a primetime game on the road or a big playoff game gets up by double digits early, can you just sort of push everything else off to the side and say, you know what, hop on my back today. I'm throwing for 300 yards, and I'm just going to go bonkers in the second half and win this game. Like Russell Wilson does it all the time. Tom Brady obviously has built a legacy doing that. And I would argue that Pat Mahomes has become one of the greatest at doing that in the NFL's history in just his first 3 years. Look at the last 2 playoff games last year, the AFC Championship game and then the Super Bowl. Like Pat Mahomes, like all these things that are going wrong around you, you make that kind of money as a quarterback so that when everything is falling apart, you can rise up and do those things. And that's been my biggest question about the Kirk Cousins tier of quarterbacks. They still make $30 to $35 million a year, even though they aren't able to do those things. Like Jimmy Garoppolo isn't the guy that's going to say, like he did it a couple times, I guess, more than Kirk, but like there's a whole tier of quarterbacks that makes ridiculous money that isn't able to rise above adverse circumstances. And I think the question off the Mahomes contract is, where do you draw the line of like, hey, this quarterback, we're just going to pay him whatever the market dictates. Russell Wilson's in that category for me. Pat Mahomes is in that category for me. Tom Brady would have been for a long time. And there's like, you could argue that Deshaun Watson's emerging into that. Cousins is not in that category for me. It makes me a little bit squeamish if I'm a general manager or I'm Rob Brzezinski and I'm trying to figure out how to build a roster around that $32 million. It's hard. So, like, Kansas City is going to have a harder time building a roster, but it's worth it because Pat Mahomes is so much better than almost every other quarterback that's in that first or second tier.
I'm not so sure that they're going to have that hard of a time. I mean, like Judd had mentioned, with what the Vikings have been trying to do for so long and find that franchise quarterback, I mean, that was the Chiefs for however many years, 30, 40 years, until we get to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they thought it could have been Alex Smith. They obviously saw something in Patrick Mahomes. I mean, Brett Veach is probably going to get the GM of the Year award. I mean, you might as well go ahead and give it to him now. But it's the way that these deals are structured. And when adept teams are the ones that can pay a quarterback what the market calls for, the $30 to $40 million range that we're seeing this thing trends towards. And I personally don't think anybody's going to be able to touch that figure, that average yearly salary, when you average it out, $40 plus million a year for Patrick Mahomes. No one's going to touch that for quite some time. But you can still use the 200 or so million that you have to field a competitive team. If, a majority of your team's still on the rookie contracts, that's inexpensive. So there are ways to do it. Smart teams can do that. The Vikings could absolutely do that. But when it comes to the point of the money talking and Kirk Cousins performing and not meeting expectations, sorry, guys, that's what the quarterback market called for. When he signed the first contract, the $84 million fully guaranteed deal, and then got the 2-year extension, quarterbacks love those short-term extensions. For a guy like Kirk Cousins to hit the open market 2-3 years from now, that benefits the player, not the team. And I think that was kind of the trade-off here for the Chiefs, where Patrick Mahomes isn't coming in asking for a Deshaun Watson-type deal, which has been reported to be a 3-year deal. That's a headache. So this is actually, when we spin this thing forward and talk about how does this deal affect Dak Prescott, how does it affect Deshaun Watson, I think that those teams are going, phew, it's not a short-term deal that we have to somehow beat the bank here or try to match that. This is a very much something that is going to benefit the Chiefs in the long run over the player. But if for someone like Patrick Mahomes, who's 24 years old, has accomplished all that he's accomplished in the first 3 seasons, including one of them, which I guess you throw away because he was Alex Smith's backup, This is the right time to make a deal like this, and I typically don't like these 10-year contract extensions because we saw how it worked out with Donovan McNabb. We saw how it worked out with Brett Favre and the lifetime deal or whatever he got in Green Bay, and also with Michael Vick. They didn't pan out, and they typically don't, but I just think something's different here because of the caliber of player that you have with Patrick Mahomes, and you assume that trajectory is only going to rise further as he gets in that second part of his 20s, before he even reaches his prime. Prime's 30 years old for a quarterback. He's 24.
So in your mind, is this a smart contract from his end then? I mean, it sounds nuts to say because it's worth so much, but is this a smart QB contract for a guy who's this good, or would he have been, for selfish purposes, better off? Courtney, do you think trying to get a 3-year contract and not a 10-year?
He could have forced them to tag him. twice. I mean,
Right.
he could have gone the Kirk Cousins route with that. I think he sees something, though. The way that the roster has been constructed, that they are in a window where they could win 3 to 5 Super Bowls over the next 3 to 5 years, and this will lure free agents in because they're going to have the funds to spend. The way that Kirk Cousins' contract was structured, I think, in a way, hurt the Vikings because of all the guys that they had to let go in free agency in 2019, or 2020 free agency, 2019 free agency. We knew that was going to happen, that it was going to eventually become so inflated that they had to kind of cut the fat where they could. The way that this deal is structured, it's only only $141 million are guaranteed, but that's guaranteed for injury only. That's all the cash he's going to be due over the next 5 seasons. That's going to give the Chiefs in their front office some flexibility to work with to go after some marquee free agents. The argument now of, do you pay Chris Jones? Do you work out a long-term extension, or expect him to hold out because they did franchise tag him? I wouldn't pay him. I think for that position and what he's getting on the franchise tag, and if you're going to work out some mega extension, it's not going to be for defensive tackle.
Sure.
I think they're in a good position. And you can argue, he could have gotten more, but I think he sees something here with just the way that this roster is constructed that, in a way he knows he's going to get paid ridiculous amounts of money. It's being touted as the largest contract in sports, and when you compare it to baseball, it's apples to oranges because baseball contracts are fully guaranteed, but this can stand up in a lot of ways to what that deal Mike Trout signed a few years ago.
The other interesting component here, just like this doesn't happen with the Chiefs, and he doesn't win the Super Bowl with Andy Reid, and like this doesn't come together the way that it does in this contract. If the Chiefs, after an 11, it was a 10-win season in 2017, a 10-6 season, actually on the heels of 2 11-win seasons in 15 and 16, if they don't move off Alex Smith. So just to obviously now in retrospect, and Alex Smith got hurt and he's old, and it's an obvious decision now with the benefit of hindsight. But at the time the Chiefs made that decision to move up 15 spots in the draft and trade for the rights to Pat Mahomes, they were coming off, like I said, multiple playoff seasons. And Alex Smith led the NFL in passer rating with a 104.7 passer rating and average yards per attempt at 8.6. Alex Smith was at his best as a former number 1 overall pick in 2017. And the Chiefs said, we're not satisfied. It's not good enough. He's still too conservative when it matters most. And we think we have a chance here.
Does that sound like something that you've heard before?
This is this all kind of circles back to me to the Vikings approach to quarterbacking has oftentimes been, even 15 years ago, it often has been, let's play the conservative route. Let's go for the 1 year Brett Favre here, which is great. Or let's play the conservative route with Kirk Cousins is the best guy available. And so even if he's not a move the needle guy, let's give him $30 million. As opposed to, you know what? You might have to trade your draft to get the guy that you want in the first round and make a bold move. And the Chiefs did that. And here they are.
I think that a guy like Smith and Cousins, they're good QBs, right? And they're efficient, and they can get you to the playoffs. But my thing is, and this is why I keep saying this, we know who Kirk Cousins is. Kirk Cousins does not strike me in any way, shape, or form as a Super Bowl winning quarterback. There's a lot of quarterbacks out there who are damn good, and they can get you to the playoffs. And guess what? They can win a playoff game, right? But when it gets the most difficult, there's also now a lot of these guys who you say to yourself, do you really trust that guy? And the answer is no. And that's why a team like the Chiefs, which is run by a lot of very smart offensive-minded folks, said, Alex Smith is really, really good, and he is secure, and our relationship is as secure as possible. But you know what? It's not exciting. Pat Mahomes is, and Pat Mahomes has that next gear. And my problem, Courtney, is I don't know if the Vikings have anybody internally now, Kubiak maybe, who can actually identify the outside kid that can get you to being, hey, we're a playoff team? Oh, no, we're actually a Super Bowl team now.
The fact that we're even questioning going into that first weekend of January, can Kirk Cousins do this?
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, tells you everything you need to know just about the level of play and the differential between someone like Patrick Mahomes, where you expect him to be able to win games. If something were to break down, you expect him to be able to take on that load and make magic happen. There's only about 5 guys, 4 maybe, if you want to take Aaron Rodgers out of that mix, because some people think he's washed, that you can truly anticipate making magic, making something out of nothing. And Kirk has just never at any point in his career been that guy. I mean, the Vikings knew that when they signed him initially. And I think that's where the buck stops with me. If we're questioning, can you win a playoff game? There's nothing else to compare here, because I'm looking at Patrick Mahomes and I know he can win a playoff game. I know he can win more than one playoff game. I know he can win a Super Bowl because he's done it. And I think we get so stuck on the numbers, but that is what the market calls for. The quarterback market is constantly evolving and changing. I mean, yeah, people are now going to criticize and be like, wow, that Jared Goff deal looks pretty bad in hindsight to what he provided. I mean, granted, you can see between Goff's deal and Mahomes and Carson Wentz's deal, the guarantees are oddly similar, and the total guarantees, not just injury guarantees. Does that mean that Patrick Mahomes is, on par with those two quarterbacks? No, it's just the way that it was structured. He's head and shoulders above everybody else. But that's how we end up judging it, I think, in the long run, just because how much money did that cost you in that move when the quarterback really hasn't been able to play to the level where you think he can transcend any sort of money that's thrown at him and know that he's going to do the job he was paid to do.
Yep. And what I'm about to say is completely unfair to Kirk, but it's true, okay?
Okay.
If you have a Mahomes type, and I understand there's about 4 or 3, so they're not exactly easy to find. But if you have that type of quarterback, that game in San Fran, the playoff game last year, is winnable. It's a winnable game. It's very difficult, and your team is not as good as their team, okay? Your lines got their asses kicked, and that's not going to change. O-line, D-line, advantage, Niners every time. But that's the type of game where if you have that quarterback, he says, I don't care. And he finds ways, if not to win that game, to give you a chance where until the clock expires, you're in that game.
And that's the funny thing about that.
That's the difference.
Like the conversation after that game, and then some of there's other games, toward the beginning of the season, and it always fell down to are you guys blaming Kirk Cousins? It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm blaming him. I'm just saying that Russell Wilson would have put the Vikings in a better So I don't know. 'Cause am I blaming him for just not physically being able to avoid pressure? Because
I think
he's
you're
slow?
assessing him.
You're saying that that's what you get.
Yeah,
he is who you thought he was, and that essentially, I mean, I don't think that's blame. I think that's self-actualization.
Wow.
In a way.
I like it.
Wow.
That's true, though.
Let's all take a moment to meditate on that.
So
Self-actualization.
this was a tough Kirk or blank, huh? Woo!
Yeah, that was. We'll get back to our regularly scheduled.
This
Kirk
is no
or
Ryan
blank.
Tannehill debate.
I mean, people hated that one, apparently.
That was great. I love Twitter. Blew up.
All right, that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, and Courtney Cronin. Thank you for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.